Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we have Harshil Agrawal. Thank you so much for joining us. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I'm
Yeah,
excited
this is
for
going to
today.
be a great show. I think we're doing something that I think is one of the hottest topics for developers, right? But before we talk about that, let's talk a little bit about you. So for folks who aren't familiar with you, do you want to give us a bit of background on yourself and your work?
Sure. Yeah. So hello everyone. My name is Harshil Agrawal, and I work in the developer relations team at n8n. I enjoy trying to automate as much as I can, and I have been now trying to also get into writing as much less code as I can because that sounds very interesting and it's been more fun for me. So that is what I have been doing. And you might have come across a project called GitHub Wrap, which I created along with n8n, Cloudinary, and Cloudflare, which was just a POC for how you can create such useful apps. I won't call it useful, but how you can create apps with low code. And the journey has been fantastic.
Yeah, and that GitHub Wrapped was cool because you kind of did the similar to Spotify Wrapped, where you kind of rolled up. It was how many repos you created and pull request issues, all those good things, and made a little kind of a shareable thing for that, which is really fun. And so you're saying that you did all that without writing much code?
Exactly. The code that I wrote was the HTML page.
Yeah.
And just to make sure that the requests go properly, I wrote some code for Cloudflare workers. That's it.
Oh, that's really cool. I didn't realize that. I assumed that that was like a custom coded project. I'm going to try to find the link to that. This is wrapped.run. Is that yours?
No, it's
no.
Let me get that for you.
Oh, got it. Okay. I will show this lowcode.land/ghwrap, and we'll put that in the show notes. Wait. For some reason, that's not showing up.
You might have to add the last.
Got it. There it is. Oh, hello, Ben, and thank you for the sub. So GitHub Wrap, that was a really cool project. And yeah, so and you said that you built that through some automation, and that is that hot topic that I want to talk about today. I feel like every developer is so motivated by automation. I think that at the bottom of everything, every developer wants to show up to work, press a button, and then take an 8-hour nap and collect a paycheck, right? Like start the automation, call it done, and you're good to go.
That's
and it sounds, I mean, you're in the space of automation. So how, I mean, I have a million questions about automation, but I guess let's ask the first one. How did you end up in this space? Like what drove you to take it on?
That's a good question. So I have always been interested in trying out different stuff, experimenting with them, and, talking about that with people. And when I came across n8n, I was like, this is interesting. I am, allowed to work, but not work at the same time. All my work is being taken care of by automated workflows. And I'm like, this is something that I am interested in. I want to get more involved into this, learn more about how automation is, how automation can help, the people across the broad spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. And so automation is one of those things that, there's that old XKCD joke that if you have a task to do, you'll talk about how much time you can save by automating that task. And then, you'll spend so much more time building and debugging and maintaining the automation than it would have taken you to just do the task. And so how do you approach automation? Like what are tasks that you see as being like prime automation targets?
For developers, if I talk about automation, it can be handling the CI/CD pipeline, because that I feel is what takes a lot of time. And working for a company that has the source code publicly available, managing the pull request and the issues is also something I see can be, help with automation can be very helpful. So those are the sectors that I feel automation can really make an impact, and not just help the company or the developers working for that, but also, keep the maintainers a peace of mind, and also encourage contributors to contribute more, because they now get the response in time. They are not waiting for your response forever. So I think that is where automation can be really helpful.
Yeah. So, and I think, the part that I'm always curious about with automation is one of the biggest pitfalls that I've seen developers fall into is trying to automate too early. And so I think there's a little bit of a maturity curve when it comes to automation, where a task needs to have reached a certain point before it's a candidate to be automated. How do you think about that? Like, what are the heuristics that you're applying when you're looking at a task to say, this one is ready for automation? What has to be true for you?
Yeah. For me, the approach that I take is, whenever I get a new task, I always do it manually to understand the whole process, document that process, because I don't know if I might, want to automate it someday. And also keep a track of how many times, I'm doing that task in a month or a week. So that gives me an idea, okay, I'm spending too much time on such a small task, which I should not do, and which is not giving me so much impact. And that's where I realized, okay, that is now time to automate it and put some time off and work on the automation workflow for this task. So just to give you an example, every time we make a new release, we have a new graphic, which we use to send out on the social media post. Now, earlier, that was done manually by a designer who would take those icons of each and every node, add it to that graphic, and then share it with us. So this was a long process, and we kind of have a release every week. So it didn't make sense to, ping the designer to do that and, wait for him to give us back the graphic and then share it on social media. So we created an automation workflow which would just do that for us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think when you see yourself doing something repetitive, and then Graham at Desk in the chat also just brought up, I'll just quote this directly. It's also worth automating important things that you don't do very often, not because you save time, but because you guarantee consistency. Sometimes guaranteeing safety makes the time and money spent worth the investment. I think I would agree with that. I think that, a big challenge that I see, and actually I would say this was maybe the original argument for why you would automate CI/CD. I think that, like at Netlify, we worked really hard on automating a lot of the CI/CD process, because what we had found is the level of complexity to do a manual deploy when you have, a big front end and all of these things, it's high enough that you get inconsistency. People miss a step, they forget to check a box, and then you accidentally deploy something broken because, the manual review process didn't work. So building out automated testing, building out, the automation of rolling, being able to just push to Git and all the things that need to happen automatically run, and then it deploys when it passes all the tests. Like that sort of thing is, I mean, now I think it's because you save a ton of time, but at first it really is a safety measure of, well, the robots are going to check the list perfectly every time. Humans may cut some corners. So what is this is always kind of an interesting one. And I love what people come up with. What is the oddest thing that you have automated?
That's a good one. I am currently playing with the Twitter API, and I have somehow managed to hook up the Twitter webhook API with n8n. Like I was assuming that I will be able to subscribe to only particular events, but that's not how the Twitter webhook API works. It is gonna send you everything that happens related to your account. So even if you tweet, if someone retweets, someone likes, someone follows you.
Oh, interesting.
So that's a chaos. It's a chaos.
Yeah.
But it's fun.
I like that. Chat, I want to hear from you too. What are you automating? What's the weirdest thing that you've automated? For me, I think the weirdest thing that I ever automated is I once automated my meals. And what I mean by that is when I was in the beginning stages of my agency, I didn't have a ton of money, so I couldn't order in all of my meals, but I also didn't have time and I wasn't a very good cook. So I needed to figure out a way to do it. So I found a friend who worked in a kitchen, and he was a cook in a restaurant. And I figured out that for like, he didn't want a ton of money, but for barely more than I was spending on groceries, he would bring me like Tupperwares with reheatable meals. And so he would just show up at my house with a cooler, and I would just open up the Tupperware and pop it in the oven. And that was like my meal automation service. So I had like completely outsourced. I didn't choose my menu. I didn't choose like what my portion sizes were. I was like, I can't think about any of this right now. Like, I'm trying to bootstrap this company. And you know, granted, my work-life balance was not good at that point. I would not recommend that. But I did really like having this whole category of things just disappear from my life, not having to go grocery shopping or think about it or any of those things. That was an interesting automation.
That sounds really
Chris
interesting.
Biscardi in the chat is saying that's not weird. That's just great food. I mean, I agree. It was, but it was something that I hadn't heard of a lot of people doing at the time. I think it's a lot more normal now with stuff like Grubhub, and there are services like Blue Apron and things that will do more of this meal delivery service. But this was, I don't think Blue Apron existed at the time that I did this. It was just like this really interesting opportunity where I knew somebody who cooked and they were looking for extra cash, and I was looking to cook less, and it was like, oh, this is perfect. Can I just give you like an extra $100 on top of my grocery bill and you'll do this thing? In retrospect, I was severely underpaying this friend. Like, it should have cost so much more. But it was great for me at the time. Let's see.
Yeah, this reminds me, one of my colleagues does something similar. So he wants to go to a particular gym to do a particular classes, but that is quite popular and they get booked so quickly. So he has this automation which would find the time in the calendar, see if he's available or not, and if also the class is available or not, and he would get that booked automatically for himself.
Oh, that's really cool. I'm going to run through some of the ideas that came in from the chat. So Ben says, one time I automated notifications of updates to the tap menu for a local barcade. That is funny. Putting data in my thesis, 40 pages of tables. That's pretty wild. Let's see what else is in here. I think people making fun of my food habits. That's fine. That's fine. Automated sending a good morning SMS to my girlfriend in the morning while I was sleeping. She figured it out when it glitched. See, this is I would say that's a good example of using automation for evil. Don't do that. No, but actually, that's a good follow-up question. What are things that you shouldn't automate? Like I would argue, and not to call you out, Big Jim. I'm not meaning to make fun of you directly, but just in general, I am a big fan of not automating human connection, right? Like I try not to do that. So what are some things that you don't automate?
Yeah, I would agree with you that whenever it's coming to interacting with people, that process should not be automated, because like you can automate certain part of it, I would say, but always have it should not be completely automated. So always have kind of a man in the middle process. So before sending out someone a message, maybe get a notification on your phone, check if it's correct or not, and then hit the send button so that it gets sent to them. So such processes where you are communicating with someone I feel should not be automated. Or if you want, make sure the content is correct and you are not sending anything wrong to them.
Yeah, that's actually so I have a lot of automations in place for Learn with Jason, and each of them has a manual review step before it goes live. I think every one of them has a manual review step before it goes live. But I do, the starting soon image is automatically generated using my Sanity API, and I have a wrapper on top of Sanity and Cloudinary, right? And then the text here in this section, all of that stuff is brought in through an API, and so this automatically updates it for every episode. And I have different automations to send calendar invites to the people on my team who update the website and do the like live captioning is being done, and that invite is automatically sent. Lots of those automations, but each of those is intercepted by a person. Either I'm looking at the the image that was generated before we go live, or like Brenda, who helps with all the scheduling for White Coat Captioning, is looking at the invites and making sure that we've all clarified it and all that kind of stuff. I think it's really, really fun, right? But that human review step is really important, at least at first. Like, you got to really work the kinks out. And when something is so automated that it doesn't, it never changes. Like, my air conditioning, for example, is on an automation schedule where it warms up in the morning and it cools down at night and all those things. No one ever reviews that. Like, it's not maybe once a year I'll bump that around and decide that I want it to be a half a degree warmer or something, but it's really that's not a process you need to look at. Right.
Right.
But that's because we tested it so much and we decided that this is where we were comfortable, and now we can ignore it. But there was that human review step at first.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's see here. But yeah, lots of things like that. Let's see. We got one. I had a senior developer that found out the coffee maker had IoT, scripted out the perfectly hot cup of coffee based on how long it took to walk from his desk to the coffee maker. I love, one of my favorite things about being in a community with a bunch of nerds is that people will figure stuff out, like how long it takes to walk to the coffee maker and time their coffee that way. It's just genius. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about n8n specifically. So what is n8n? Like, what problem is it trying to solve?
So it's trying to solve the problem of giving everyone, an ability to automate their workflows or create automated workflows. Now, oftentimes as developers, because we have those technical knowledge, we have the programming knowledge, we know how to code, and we can, go easily with that. But people who are not so good with coding, or who lack a certain kind of knowledge around programming or coding, it becomes difficult for them to, get into the space. They have to, learn coding, which becomes a kind of a hurdle for them, because they cannot spend too much time into that. So what n8n does, it gives them the power. So it basically gives them a nice UI, which they can use to integrate different things and create their own automation workflows. So it's think of it as you are writing code, but you are designing it using flowcharts.
Nice. I like that. And there's a question in the chat from Chris. Is n8n, is it a shortened word, the way that like A11Y is short for accessibility? Is n8n short for something?
Yep, n8n is short for Nodemation.
Nodemation.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So n8n, all the integrations in n8n we call Node, and n8n is built using Node.js. So that's why the name Nodemation, and in short, it's n8n.
Got it. All right. Little history there. Okay. So I think I could ask you a bunch of abstract questions about n8n, but I think it'll be easier to show how it works. So let's do the switch now, and we'll jump over and do a little bit of code. So bear with me while I switch over to the pair programming screen.
Let's do it.
Hello, everyone. We're back. It's time for pair programming. Before we do that, let's do a quick shout out to the sponsors and captioning. We've got Amanda from White Coat Captioning here, writing down everything so that if you want to follow along in text format, you can do that. That's right on the homepage of the site at learnwithjason.dev. That live captioning is made possible through the sponsorship of Netlify, Fauna, and Auth0. All of them are kicking in to make this show more accessible, which means a lot to me. I hope it means a lot to you. And I am on the hunt for new sponsors. So if you or your company are interested in putting your logo and making the show more accessible, hit me up. Get in my DMs. Right. So we are talking to Harshil today. You can find him on Twitter right at that link there, or at harshil.dev. And we're talking about n8n, which is at n8n.io, which you can find there. All of these links will be in the show notes as well. And this is that GitHub wrap that we were talking about. So you can go check that out and give that a try. And this is one of many XKCDs on automation that we were referencing today. So if I want to do some work with n8n, I want to automate something, where should I start?
Right. So it depends on how you want to do it. You can run it locally on your machine via the npm package.
Okay.
You can sign up for n8n Cloud if you don't want to manage your own servers. We recently also launched n8n Desktop app, which is kind of empowering people who don't want to sign up on cloud and who don't want to run it via the npm package. So they can just download it and use n8n on their own machine.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. So let's you know what, this is a coding show. Let's do it locally through some code here. So let me get into the Learn with Jason. Am I going to write these workflows locally? Like, is there a repo I'm going to be able to share at the end of this?
No, but you can always share the workflows because it gives you a JSON file in the end.
Okay, so yeah, I'll put the workflows in there. So let's do let's make a new directory called n8n workflows, or I'm going to call it automation. And then we'll move in here. All right. Okay, so I have an empty folder and I want to use the n8n package. So where do I start?
So you can install n8n globally if you want. So it's like npm install -g n8n.
And do I need a certain node version or anything for this?
Yeah. So currently n8n supports node version 14. So you have to make sure that you are using that.
Okay. Node 14. So I'm using 14.8.3. And then I'm going to npm install -g, and you said n8n?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to get that installed. I see. Oh, what's up, Hojo? Welcome to the chat. Actually, Hojo was on the show when Ben did a takeover. So where is it? We'll go here, and then we'll go to the search, and then we're going to search for Hojo, and there it is. So this was a show when Ben took over, and Hojo came and did a whole thing on n8n. So if you want to dig in deeper, this is actually a great episode to watch because Hojo's got some wild animation put together with n8n. So that's a good one to see some of the really cool stuff that you can do and really dig in deeper. Let's see, are we installed? We're installed. Hey, all right. So we've got n8n. There it is. And if I do like a n8n-v, we're at 0.158.0.
That's perfect. And now you can start n8n by simply running n8n start.
n8n start.
And it will start on the server for us.
Okay. Yep. And I can press O to open in browser.
Exactly.
I love it. All right, let me drag this window on over here. There it is. Is it going to let me skip this? Yes. Okay. So I have skipped the onboarding. Sorry to your marketing people who have no idea who I am now. And I see a node. So this is kind of what you were talking about when you said it was node based. I have a start button. When I click it, nothing happens. But then I can see that there's kind of a workflow thing here.
Yep. So when every time you start a new workflow, there is going to be a start node, which is the starting point of the workflows. But you might want to, run your workflows based on some external events. In that case, we would use different kind of nodes that are called trigger nodes. But we'll get into that later on.
Okay.
So if you click on that plus button, it will open the nodes panel, and you can find out all the different kind of nodes you want. We have also categorized the nodes so that it becomes a bit easy to find out what kind of function you want to run.
Wow. Okay. There's a lot in here. All right. So we've got communication stuff. Okay. So like I said, I have not looked at n8n before. I was not expecting it to be this comprehensive. Like, I realized that sounds like I had low expectations, but honestly, I didn't expect to see quite so many services hooked in here. This is a ton of stuff that you can mess with. This is fun. This is really cool. All right. So what's a good place to start, I guess?
the good place is to start up with what do we want to do or today? What do we want to automate today?
So I think we had talked about doing a kind of, let's roll our own newsletter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if I want to roll my own newsletter, what should I start? Or how should I start?
So the first step is we want to get subscribers, right? So maybe we have a form where people can fill out their information.
Okay.
So we can do this now in two different ways.
Okay.
Number one, we can have Netlify functions, or sorry, Netlify forms. And we have the Netlify trigger node in n8n, which would trigger our workflows whenever someone submits that information. Or we can have n8n serve that page for us. So that's really cool. And that's something that I really like, is that you can serve your own HTML pages via n8n. So when someone hits that endpoint, it gives you that page, and then people can sign up on that page.
Interesting. Okay. So given that we have just about an hour, what's the fastest way to get here? I'm confident that I can code a form really quickly. So depending on how much additional automation we're going to do later on, I'll let you make the call on which is the faster way to go.
Let's do it with the webhook approach.
Okay.
All right. So the first thing we would want to do is add a webhook. Now there is something we need to know is whenever we are using any kind of trigger nodes, we want to make sure that we start the n8n tunnel because that is how it will make the webhook accessible on the internet.
Okay.
So you can start n8n running n8n start -- tunnel.
Tunnel.
Yep. And we can now go back. Perfect. Now we can go back to n8n instance. So that's the tunnel URL that we'll be using.
Okay.
And now click on again the plus icon on the top and search for webhook.
Here?
Yep. So we want the webhook node. Yeah, exactly. And for now, let's keep it as a GET request because we want to serve our page.
Okay.
And down, if you can scroll below, down. Now, we can also select the HTTP method. It can be GET, POST, or HEAD. For now, we are going to just leave it to GET. And we can also customize the path. So this can be something like sign up. So your URL will then change.
Okay.
So if you now scroll a bit up, you will see that now it's the URL and then sign up. And we want to respond to this not exactly immediately. We want to serve a page. So we would select when last node finishes.
Okay.
Yep. And let's select add option. Okay. So
add
response.
Option. Got it.
Yeah. And we will select property name. And in that, we can leave it as data. That's completely fine.
Okay.
And we can close this and we can add another node. This will be a set node.
Set?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the node where we will be setting up the HTML page. The first thing we want to make sure is we only send out the HTML page and not the input coming in on from the webhook. Okay. So what you want to do is toggle keep only set to true.
Okay.
And then we can add value, select string. And now over here, the property name, we need to change it to data because that's what we were referencing earlier.
Okay.
And in the value, this is where we will paste the code for the HTML form.
The code for the HTML form?
Yeah. So if you click on in here, yeah.
Okay, so we're doing I'm going to do a really quick and dirty, and to keep it really simple, I'm also not going to put in a name. I'm just going to use email. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that.
So we're going to do label for email, and we'll say email, and then do an input type email, ID, email, name, email, and then we'll send a button, button type submit, and we'll make that say subscribe. Okay, so do I need to add anything else here? Like, do I have to tell it where to submit to?
We do, but right now we don't have that endpoint here, so we can, show it in the next step.
Okay. And this is auto saving, I assume, so I can just close it.
Yeah, you can close it.
Okay.
Close this node as well.
Okay.
We'll save the workflow first so that our webhook gets registered.
Saved.
Right. Now, you can copy the webhook link. So if you open the webhook node and click on the test URL.
Got it.
And click on the execute node button on the top. And now in the browser, just make a request to this URL.
Wow.
So now we have the HTML form running here. So what happened is we sent a request to n8n. n8n gave us back the information that we asked for. Now, the next thing we want to do is make this form work. So if you send a request right now, nothing is going to happen.
Right.
So
it should, I think, just submit to itself. So let's do this. I'm going to hit the button and we should just see the email come up in the query string.
It's going to give you an error.
It does, and it doesn't like it because we didn't hook it up.
We didn't, because in the test mode, n8n is going to listen to the request only once. So we will have to again start the test server so that it listens to the request.
Got it. Okay. Got it.
Perfect. Let's just have another webhook which would listen to this incoming request. So what I would do is hover over the webhook node.
Hover over.
Yeah, and there is a duplicate option. Yeah, we'll just duplicate this and we'll change the endpoint. So instead of sign up, maybe we call it register.
Okay.
And do we want to send a user a success message? Maybe thank you for registering or something like that.
I think so. Do I need to get the email out or anything?
No, we will do that later on.
Later on. Okay, great. All right. So then I can duplicate this and can I just like connect it? Yep. Oh, that was very intuitive. I like that. Okay. So let's dig in here and I want this to be, I was just watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine again. And so I'm thinking about Die Hard constantly. So that'll be our success message.
Wonderful. And the last thing we want to do is change the form submission action.
Change the form submission action. And that needs to be, oops.
In the set node.
This one, right?
No, yeah.
Okay, so I'm taking this one and then I go in here and I need my form action. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So now I go to this one and I'm going to execute.
Yep.
And then I need this one to be execute. Oh, they're both executing.
No, they're both executing.
Got it. Okay. So let me go back here. All right.
Yep. Now, before submitting, just make sure that you execute the workflow again because the workflow has executed and stopped. Yeah.
Okay.
So now if you subscribe, it should send us a message.
Hey, and there's our email.
Wonderful.
Okay.
And now what we want to do is in this webhook, if you click on JSON response right after table.
Here, yep, got it.
Yeah, in the center. Yeah. So if you scroll down a bit, you would also see the response here. Now what we can do is we can share it. We can add it to a database. It can be any kind of database that we want, maybe, or just a Google Sheet or Airtable, whichever you prefer. Once we have that information stored in a database, we can also send the user a verification email. So we can generate a verification code, send them that unique link. Once they click on it, another webhook runs. It checks the verification box alongside that user email, and then we can send them an email.
Okay. Let's maybe skip the database part because we don't have time for that, but let's do the verification email. Does that seem good?
Good. Yeah, let's do that.
All right.
Perfect. Now we can close this node.
Okay.
And we are getting the response in the webhook one node. And remember, in the webhook one node, we also set the response coming in from the last node. So all the nodes that we are now going to add has to be between the webhook one node and the set one node.
Got it. So I need to put a new node in here.
Yeah.
And I do that by this button.
Clicking on, yep.
Okay.
Now, where do we want to send an email, right? So which service do you want to use for that? You can use the send email node itself, which is a generic email node.
Uh-huh.
But for email, one thing we need to do is we need to create credentials.
Okay.
No. So if you open the send email node.
Oh, email.
Yeah. Select the send email one. And if you see, we will have to set up a credentials for that.
Which we don't have.
Which we don't have.
Okay.
That's what I realize right now.
I have a SendGrid account. Can we connect with that?
We can do that.
Okay, so let me add SendGrid. And if I want to create new,
just pass on the API key.
Okay, so this isn't something that you can like pull in. All right, let me get over to SendGrid. I'm probably gonna have to do some of this off screen to not show that API key. I can't remember. Actually, I can't remember if SendGrid shows that right when you log in. So I'm actually gonna log in off screen to make sure that I don't accidentally have to go roll all of my keys, because I really don't want to do that. I think it's emailing me a key. Oh, there it is. Okay. Hold on. Two-factor auth. There we go. And where is my key?
Yeah, so it would be under settings.
Okay, so I'm going to, so I'm in SendGrid here. I'm going to go to settings and API keys. I'm not going to do that on screen because I can't remember if they're hidden or not. They are hidden, so I can, that's the public one, but this is the actual key. So I need to get that. And I'm going to actually have to create a new one, I think. So let's create a new one. This is going to be called n8n. So fine, yeah. We'll create this new key. I've got the key.
Also, just for anyone who is new to SendGrid or any of the services, we also document all the steps so that you know how you can create those credentials. So in the credentials window itself, there is an open docs link. So it will take you directly to the documentation page where you can follow the docs and then create the credentials.
Great. Okay, so I hooked up my SendGrid account. I have an API key here, and we are now ready to do stuff, but I don't really know how this works. So maybe we go mail?
Mail, yeah.
Send.
And then you want to send, perfect.
Send
and now we want to send an email.
Yes, and I need to just double check what the email is that I've set up here. Sender authentication, I have jamstackconf.com set up as a valid email. So let's do that. We'll do a no reply at jamstackconf.com, and the sender name will be here, and then we'll say so this one I want to pull out of
one. Yep. So yeah, we click on the cogs icon and then add expression. And now this is coming in from the previous node. So yeah, current node, input data.
Input data.
JSON, query, and then the email.
That was easier than I expected. That was really nice.
Another interesting thing is you can use JavaScript functions in here. So let's just say you want to replace something. You can do .replace that, and it will also work like that.
Very cool. Okay. So that did exactly what I wanted. So that's wonderful.
In the
subject, we can be like, confirm your email address. And we could use a dynamic template, but I'm not going to do that. So then our message body, how do we get a verification link in here?
So we can either, generate our own. So once we store it in the database, we can give them a unique ID and ask them to, go to that to that link. So this can be another webhook URL with the query parameter of that unique ID. It will then go to that database, check if that unique ID exists or not, and then, update that. So that's the process. If we want to do database, if you want to include database, I think for now we can just have, the simple URL, maybe the same URL, and just say verified.
Okay. So are we setting up another webhook for that, or what's the?
Yeah. Let's set up another webhook. Okay. We'll have the endpoint as /verified.
Okay. Please verify your email address by clicking this link, and we need to set that up. So we'll set this one up. Okay, we'll go here. Then I need to duplicate this one, and this one is going to be verify, and that this all stays the same.
Yep.
Okay, and then I need to do what? I mean, really, just send a message, right? So I can just duplicate this one. And this is going to return. I'm keeping it simple so that we can get everything done within the time that we have. So we'll just post a message that says you're verified. I'm going to hook that up. That's so slick. Okay. And then.
And we want to copy the link.
That's right. So I'm going to copy this one, head out to here, go into my body. Good. Okay.
And you can execute this node directly. Just execute the SendGrid node. How we can do it from scratch?
Oh, execute it directly? Yeah, let me execute it directly. Let's do that.
Now we'll have to execute the whole workflow because there is no data on there.
Okay, so I'm signing up. We're going to do this again.
We have to.
Every time.
Have to make the request.
All right. We'll start it. I'm going to reload. Okay. And then I should.
It's already sent you the message.
Yeah, all right. So I can now see that I have an email here and it says, please verify. We've got this link here. Looks like SendGrid obfuscated it for us, which is fine. And then
now we have to execute the workflow again.
Okay, so let's execute the workflow again. And then I'm going to come out here.
You executed the node.
Okay. All right, let me execute the workflow. And we'll click that again. And now we're verified.
You're verified.
All right. This is slick.
Well, so what we did is we created the whole sign up process for our newsletter. Well, I am saying it for the newsletter, but it can be implemented for almost anything.
Yeah. I mean, this is really nice because, I'm seeing here, like there's a lot of glue code that we would need to make this stuff work. We'd have to go in and we can make it simple. Like you could set up a serverless function for this and it's not that much glue code. But this UI driven side of things is pretty nice. Where, the code we're writing is like the actual messages, the form you see, it's the message you should see. That's pretty slick. So good. Okay. All right. What should we do next?
Well, now that we have the subscribers, we want to send them some good content, right? So I had this crazy idea that I always wanted to try out, but I could not, is to, create a space where whatever I read, I make notes of that and then share it with people. So based on what kind of process you use, if you use Airtable, Notion, Braindrop, whatever, you get that information, hook it up in, if you're using SendGrid, create a template and hook it up in there, and then send the people those emails. Now, I wanted this to be completely automatic, so I don't have to, go ahead and do this every time. So for that, there is another node, which is a trigger node that is called the cron node. So we can use the cron node to tell n8n, hey, you should run this workflow at this particular time of the day, month, year, whenever we want to do.
What was it called? Sorry.
A cron node, cron,
Cron.
C-R-O-N. Yeah.
Okay, so I have an add a cron time, and we're going to need to run this like every minute so that we don't have to wait very long to see it work.
Yeah, but because it's in test mode, we can select whatever time we want.
Oh, okay.
And
all right. So
and
we can say like
it
every week on Wednesday at noon, I want to send out my
newsletter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we could do it more than once too. Like we could do it every, Wednesdays and Fridays or something like that.
Exactly.
Okay, that's cool. And there's a whole, retry on fail, continue on. This is all very cool. All right, so that makes sense. And then, so we've got our cron node. Then what?
No. Then what? Let's see. Because we don't have any data right now in Airtable or anywhere, what we can do is we can maybe get some information from the Pokemon API and send that as in the newsletter.
Sure.
So now if you search for Pokemon, you definitely are not going to find a node.
Okay.
But there is a node that's called HTTP request node.
All right.
So this node, you can make any kind of HTTP calls.
Okay. Actually, you know what I have is I have the API for the schedule. So that's an easy one. It gives us some data that I'm familiar with, and it's not super big. So it's a pretty light amount of data to grab. So we can go in here and we'll do a GET request to the schedule. We're going to get a response in JSON. There is no authentication required. Do we need anything else?
No. We might need something, but let's just execute and see how this works.
Okay, let's execute. There it goes.
There it goes. Now, what we are seeing on the top is it says that there is one item, but your array contains multiple items. So this is something that n8n does. All the data that is coming in, and it wraps up into an array, and we don't want to do that. So what we can do is we can go to options and then add option and then split into items and then toggle it to true. Okay. And now if we execute this node again, we'll see 6 different items.
Perfect. Okay.
Right. So now we have this, assuming we have a template already created, what we can do is we can send this to subscribers, and we can again, just go with SendGrid.
Okay, and we're gonna send. Okay. Let's see. So we called that no reply at jamstackconf.com, and then the sender name was learn with Jason. Recipient domain is going to be. Should I hard code this, or is this going to come through on the rest of the workflow?
So what we should do is we should first get the contact information. So instead of selecting the mail resource, what I would do is I would select the contact resource first.
Okay. Well, we don't have that just yet. Like we didn't build that piece. So in the ideal flow, what would happen is we would use SendGrid to store our contact. And then we would use this contact resource, which would let us find one.
Find one or get all.
And then we would be able to, get all of them and then send on each one. But we don't have that set up. So instead, we're going to send an email. And dang it got rid of my stuff. Okay, no reply at jamstackconf.com. And then the sender name is learn with Jason. And the recipient email is going to be, for now, hard-coded to jason@langsdorf.com. Okay, good. So then the subject will be upcoming Learn with Jason episodes. Okay. And we don't have a dynamic template, but we could grab one out if we needed it. So then we get a message body. Can we do formula stuff in here? Add expression?
Yep.
Oh, cool. Okay. So nodes. and then I get
HTTP
request, output data, JSON. Then, oh, this is cool. Okay. So I want the title, and then can I make this into like custom stuff? Like, can I do a thing like, or I guess it would be like here, and then because it's, this is plain text, right? So we would just kind of put this out here, and then I would be able to put in the slug current, right? And then that gives us that. And then can I loop through these, or is it automatically going to loop through these?
So what is going to happen right now is, because the previous node returned 6 items, it is going to send out 6 different emails for each of those items.
Oh, okay. I got you. So, and that's whatever. That's fine. We'll live with that for now. We would change that in the future, but then I can put in the. Do I have a description in here? Yeah, let's put the description in here. So, yeah, seems okay.
Seems good.
Then, let's maybe put the date in as well. Okay. And you said we can use JavaScript, so I'm gonna just to locale. Good enough.
Anything else you want to add over here?
I don't think so. I think this is fine. It's good enough for a demo.
All right, let's test it out then.
Okay, so I'm gonna execute just this node, I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm executing the node. Going over to here, I'm going to have. Oh, that's a verification. Let me get this off screen so that it's not showing all my business. And bad request.
We don't have the subject in there.
Oh, you know what I can do? I can add an expression, and I can say new episode scheduled, and then we can put input data. I can already see how useful this is. Okay. So we've got that. Now I'm going to execute the node. It did the thing. There's my 6 emails. And I'm going to try to shrink this box so that we only see those ones. Yeah. So check this out. Here are our emails. And each one of these, that's a little gross, but that's fine. And then we get the date, we get
the description.
Yeah, this is awesome. And then if I click this, I'm going to copy it so it opens in this browser. It picked up my parentheses, so I need to fix that. But otherwise it worked. This is slick. Like, this is really cool that this just works, and like how quickly we were able to put all of that together. This is powerful stuff. Like, I'm honestly kind of at a loss as to how quickly this all happened.
I know, like, honestly, I hope my colleagues aren't watching, but most of my work is now being handled by n8n itself.
No, this is the dream, right? Like, we all, as developers, we want this stuff to be, you know, we want this to work. And what I think is cool about this, like what we've got here is, so for example, we could do something like a weekly email that checks the schedule and checks like the previous instance of the schedule from last week, and then grabs anything that's new. And I could then send out a digest of like, here are the episodes that got published last week, and here are the episodes that got scheduled last week. I could get all of that information and send it in one email, all automatically using this format.
Exactly.
Okay. There's a really high likelihood that I'm actually going to do that. Because it's just really nice. Like, I have meant to do that sort of thing where we send out like a a digest of what's new and learn with Jason. And nobody has time to write that. And like, I would love to have it, but I think we've sent it out maybe twice, which is not great when you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to start doing this thing. And then you do it and you're like, ah, crap, I was very inconsistent on that. This is really, really slick. So when we started, like before we actually opened the show, we were talking about everything we wanted to accomplish and how it was really ambitious and we were going to run out of time. We're now 30 minutes ahead of schedule.
Wow.
So what else should we look at? What else can we? I mean, clearly we've got dozens of things that we can do with n8n. So with the 30 minutes we have left, what else do you want to show off here?
Maybe like we can try to be ambitious over here and see if we can hook up Twitch with n8n, because you do a lot of live streams and you might want to do that.
Yeah, let's. Oh, no Twitch.
That's the thing. We don't have a Twitch node yet.
Okay, all right.
But we can easily hook up n8n with Twitch, which involves a couple of steps. So what we are basically going to do is subscribe to the Twitch API or the Twitch webhook in a way.
Oh, okay. So this would be start the workflow when it's called. Okay.
Yep. Let's create a new workflow from scratch because you don't want to mess with this one. So we save it. You can save this workflow. And on the left-hand side, that is a new option. Yeah.
Okay, so this one is going to be...
All right, let's do this.
Okay. So I'm saving that.
Let's do this.
Okay.
Before moving to the new workflow, let's show how you can download it and how you can share it with others.
Yeah.
So there is an option you see that says download. So if you will click on that, it will download the workflow, and this is a JSON file. The cool thing is it does not download your credentials. So your credentials are still safe with you, but you can share it with others. They just have to set up their own credentials and then they can use the workflow out of the box.
Great. Okay, so I have downloaded this and I just set it up. And so now we have that automation there. So let's do a GitHub repo create, and then I'm going to copy this. All right, make it public. Yes. Okay, and then I'm going to git add all. Great. And I want to look at this before we do it. So let's pop this open here. And here we have our list of nodes. So we've got our base start, and like I should probably be, so this base start we're actually not using, right?
Yeah.
Then we've got a sign up through webhook. Webhook ID is here. The parameters are data. We've got that. Here's that form we wrote. That's a set node. So, and these are the things like I could change these. I didn't do this before, and we'll see if this explodes. I could have named each of these steps and said like, you know, set up, sign up form, and like handle submission and send email and all that stuff. But we just didn't do that. So then I've got all my nodes here, and let's get down to, here is my send grid. And it says which credentials to use, but they're not included.
Yeah, they're not included.
Okay, so I'm going to do a quick, just a find for SendGrid, right? And at no point does the SendGrid API show up. And like if I check credentials, there's no API keys here. So this is nice. Like I like this. I can send this around to my team. You know, we can use whatever service we need to share those credentials with each other securely and theoretically publish this stuff out. And this is what's also exciting about this. Here's something that I think is cool. If I am a company, for example, and I want to create some easy ways for people to use my service with other things, I could publish this as a workflow and say, if you want to set up your SendGrid account to have a sign up flow and then send whatever this thing is from your API, here's a starter that will get you like 90% of the way there, and you just have to go mess with this template for what goes into the email and add your credentials.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
cool.
And we also have a workflows repository where people who have their own workflows, who create the workflows, they always share it there. So if you go to n8n.io/workflows, yep. So this lists, I don't know how many workflows, but there are some cool workflows in there. And you can search those workflows based on the nodes that you are interested in to see what people are building with such particular nodes.
Very, very, very cool. So here's, I mean, just tons and tons and tons of things in here. And are these curated? Do I submit to these, or how does this work?
Yeah, so people submit this workflows. So you have to create an account on n8n.io to submit this.
Nice. Really cool. Okay. So we've got all that. Let me commit and say feature add a newsletter workflow. Okay. So then I'm going to push that up, and now if we go here, it's the wrong window, we're in this window. We've got our newsletter JSON, so if anybody wants to go check that out, there you go. This will also be in the demo of the demo option for the episode details. Okay, so we've got that, and then we were going to do another one, and so I need to restart n8n. Do I need a? I need a tunnel because we're doing n8n start.
Yeah.
Tunnel, and we're gonna grab that out.
While what we did right now is while we were building this, we were testing it, and that is why we always had to run the workflows manually. But once this is complete, what we can do is we can activate the workflow, and once the workflows are activated, instead of using the test URL from the webhook, all we have to do is use the production URL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I can't test this anymore because I just went and deleted that SendGrid API key because somebody, let me go check. Madriax warned us a second ago that because the tunnel was live, somebody could have come in and grabbed that API key. So I have now deleted the API key, so it's no longer valid. But that's fine because we already did that part. We're on to the next thing. So I'm going to create a new workflow. And for this workflow, we're not going to use the start. So let's do this one a little bit cleaner, right? So I'm going to delete this. Can I not delete this one without creating a new
start node? Yeah, the start node cannot be deleted.
Okay, even if I have a different one, like a webhook trigger or whatever?
Yeah, you cannot delete the start node.
Oh,
it has to be there.
I understand. Okay, gotcha.
But you can disable it if you want.
Okay, so I've got a webhook. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to hook this up to Twitch. So what? Yeah, I'm actually, now I'm at a loss. I'm not sure what to do.
Yeah. So what we can do is we will have to create an application on Twitch. We will also need to have the Twitch CLI installed.
We might not have enough time to do that.
That's what I say. That's why I say, like, we can be ambitious.
Yeah, let's maybe get a little more conservative and maybe do something that doesn't require. Whenever I get into the Twitch developer stuff, it always takes longer than I want it to. So I think for the sake of not ending on a halfway finished project, let's maybe not do the Twitch thing.
Cool. Go ahead.
There are a few things that are kind of interesting in here. So what might be worth talking about are the high level flows. So one flow that we just looked at is the webhook. Another one that is kind of interesting is when something happens from an external source. Like, for example, we've got in app.netlify.com, if I want to rebuild a site, I can let's grab one of, here's like an 11D site. And I go into my build and deploy, and we can do Buildhook. So if I create one of these, then calling this causes the site to build. But what if I want to listen? What if I want to listen for like a build to start or something like that? If I don't have the ability to call an n8n webhook, is there a way for it to listen for events?
It has. So if we go back to n8n, there is a Netlify trigger node. If you search for Netlify,
oh wow,
there is. You can see we have two different nodes, and because we want to listen to events, we will use the Netlify trigger node. And then if you click on the event, yeah, we can see what we want to do.
That's cool. Okay, so it does all this for us. That's
exactly
slick. And so as a like with other services here, I assume you've got kind of similar setups where, depending on what we're doing, we can listen for certain events, assuming there's a node for that thing. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is huge then. So what this could do is I can kick off a workflow. Like if my deploy fails, I can page someone.
Yeah.
Or post to Slack or send an email or send a text message or whatever it is that I want to do, or even like tweet, right? Like I could have something where whenever, here's an idea for an open source project, whenever the site builds for production, we could kick off something that would go through the commits, build a change log, and so you could run something like conventional commits or the changelog CLI, and then you could email that changelog to everybody who's on the mailing list, and you could tweet and say, whatever version just got released, new docs, like docs are updated, click here for details, and that could link to the changelog.
So we kind of had that process. We have this quarterly hackathon we call Hack Mission, that is hackathon plus automation. And one of my colleagues did exactly the same. So they created a whole workflow which would automatically go through the commits after every release, create the changelog, and then share it in Mattermost.
So cool. So cool. Click on the trigger tab. All right, so here's stuff that can be triggered. So yeah, we can listen to just so many services here. Form.io, Get Response, Help Scout, and MailChimp. What else? SurveyMonkey. So that I can see, okay, here's a use case where I see this being really, really powerful. We have a lot of folks on our team who can code, but they prefer not to. And we have folks who are like, if you put their feet to the fire, they will code, but it's not really their comfort zone, and they always feel like they're doing it in a way that they just feel like they're doing something that's not really their job. Like our UX research team, for example, they can code, but they wish they didn't have to. And so in a situation like this, if they're running a survey, they want to do something like when results come in, they want to post those results in Slack, or when results come in, they want to send a daily digest to the research team that says, this is all of the submissions that we got today. Or just any of those sorts of wrap-ups or roll-ups of data. Right now, if the service offers that, they will use it. But if they need to do anything custom, they're kind of frustrated because they don't really want to try to custom code anything. They don't really have the bandwidth to go ask for another team to come in and help. So this suddenly unlocks a lot of potential here, because now if they're using, for example, SurveyMonkey, they can just say, whenever the collector gets an event of response completed, I want to send an email. And they can just build this from drop downs instead of stuff like that. That's really, really cool. And I'm assuming that we've also got, we can do Slack things in here. So I'm going to skip the credential part, but I can do a message. So I can, so we can send things, ephemeral, that's cool. I need to get somebody from the Slack API team or somebody who's into the Slack API to just come on and show some of the potential of Slack ops, because my goodness, there are some potential. But just some really incredible stuff here. And like, I'll give you another example. I, as you know, in my management role, I need to collect and share data with other people around the company to say, all right, here are some metrics for the team. Here's some of the things we accomplished. Here are some of our upcoming projects. Here's where to go if you need information, et cetera, et cetera. That type of information needs to be aggregated.
Yep.
And I am so horribly, terribly bad at it. So it's inconsistent. You know, when I get it put together, it's usually like junky notes that aren't formatted very well. I'm now kind of imagining, like, if I figure out a way to collect those things in, say, a Notion database or an Airtable database or a Google Sheet, then I could set up a cron job that'll just pull each of those sections, put them into a formatted bulleted list with a heading, and send that to a Slack channel as like, here's the digest of everything that happened in the developer experience org in the last month.
You can take it a step forward, and we do almost exactly the same, but we have built a dashboard on top of that with Retool. So we now have some pretty looking charts with all that data. So we have workflows running every day, every month, gets those data, put them in a Postgres database, and then we have Retool where we have created those charts.
Okay. And you're talking about Retool, retool.com?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Unbelievable. Yeah, exactly. Like, these are the things that, you know, one of the things that I wasn't ready for when I transitioned out of in individual contributor work and into leadership work was how much of the job transitions away from creating and instead transforms into aggregating and sharing. Your job is no longer to create things. Your job is to, you know, collect values and then share that context. You're trying to make sure that people are plugged into the right things, that people aren't doing duplicate work, that everybody has connections to the resources that they need to make sure that we get the best outcomes. There's a lot of moving parts in a company, and the function of leadership is to make sure that those moving parts are not moving independently. They're aware of each other, right? Because, you know, you as a developer, if you have to also check with everybody in the company every time you make a decision, you're never going to get anything done. It's my job to look at what you're doing and know that other people are working on similar things and go ask those questions and share the context so that we make those connections early.
Exactly.
It takes me so freaking long to get all of that stuff done. And a lot of it is because the challenge is, you know, you collect some context, but you don't always know where to send it. And so, you know, you're trying to figure out these centralized places and all those sorts of things. And I'm just kind of imagining the capabilities that we can put together by using a tool like this, because I always want to build a tool, right? I'm like, oh yeah, I could stand up a serverless function, and then I could use this API, and then I could put all that together, and it could send to Slack. I don't have time to build that. And more so, I shouldn't build that because I don't have time to maintain it, right? So even if I build it, as soon as something goes wrong or needs to change, like I won't be able to go fix it. And beyond that, if I do fix it, if I ever change roles, the person who takes my role, they don't necessarily have the same skill set or the same tools or anything like that. So they'd have to dig into my most likely undocumented, most likely spaghetti-ish, most likely full of commit messages like, damn it. You know, like it's not going to be an easy system to step into, but this is visual. Being able to look at a workflow like this and see like, yes, I mean, this one doesn't make any sense because I just put nonsense together. But if I switch over to my newsletter, I can see that I've got, you know, if I had named these properly, I've got a sign up flow that does this, and then it sends an email. I don't have to know how the code works. I don't have to look through 500 lines of somebody else's undocumented code to figure out what's going on. I can at a glance kind of get at least the gist of what's going on. And that is really, really powerful.
And I have actually talked to users, and I have seen that happening in real world scenario. So one of our users, he was an active user of n8n, and he was using n8n in his organization, but he had to change jobs and move to a different company. The whole process of moving or offboarding and onboarding a new person was very easy for them, because it is, they had the visual representation out there. So for the other person also, it became really easy to understand what this flow does, what is happening in each of these nodes. And it really helped them with the whole process.
Yeah. So I've got a question from American 2050 talking about code. Does this also generate a code version, or is it always run through the UI?
So we are working, there is a POC already created, but it's not tested out yet with all the features. But we are working on this so that people can run these workflows without having to spin up the UI.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think this is... like I said when we started this show, automation is one of those things that developers get really excited about. I am clearly demonstrating that with the fact that I'm like giddy over all the things I can automate. I think, so it's maybe worth taking a quick step back and just adding a reminder. Automation is one of those things that should happen when you have repeatable tasks. Like, start automating when the things are actually repetitive. Don't start out by trying to predict what will be automated and automating stuff that's not automatable yet. Make sure you've observed a thing, done it manually enough times to figure out where the parts are that are actually repetitive. Because that is a hell of a trap to fall into when you're trying to predict behavior and automate it at the same time. It's not going to work out. You're going to spend a lot of time fixing your automation. It's way more work than just doing the thing repetitively until you get the rhythm. I manually managed every aspect of Learn with Jason for about 100 episodes before I figured out that before I got things to a stable enough place that I could automate safely. And the format of the show is really stable. So when I do things like change the format of the show, we're working on a podcast version, for example. There are a lot of things that I got to think through, and I probably won't automate them for a long time until we've figured out like what format should the podcast be. How should it be? How are we actually going to publish it? What's the editing going to look like? What do we need to create on my side? What do we need to create on, on Chris, my editor's side? Like all the things that are going to be in motion there. I can't automate that until we've actually locked those things down.
Exactly. And what I have found really useful is just try to document the steps. It does not have to be detailed enough, but just try to document and see what steps you are doing, because not everything can be automated, but maybe one or two steps of that whole process can be automated. And that can itself, save you a lot of time.
Absolutely. Well, Harshil, I think we are probably at a pretty good stopping point here. We were able to demonstrate so much stuff. I can't believe how fast we got through what we said we wanted to do with this newsletter setup. I am truly impressed with the just kind of the speed and ease. Like, it was very intuitive to use n8n, which is not always the case with automation tools. A lot of times you kind of have to learn the way the automation tool thinks in order to use the automation tool. And in this case, like, there's always a learning curve, but it felt like it was pretty shallow. So thank you very, very much for kind of spending some time with us today. Let's do a quick round of links here. So make sure everyone you go and follow Harshil on Twitter. Make sure you go and check out n8n.io on the website. And remember that you've got a local version, which is what we use today. And then there are also options like n8n Cloud, where this is hosted for you. What else do we need? We needed to, here's an episode if you want to go deeper. Where else should someone go if they want to go deeper? I'm going to share this one and the workflows. Any other resources that you want people to be aware of for more n8n work?
If you just want to interact with the community and see what others are building, the community forum, I would say, is the best place for that. Okay,
so here is a link to the forum. Yeah, this was wonderful. So why don't I do a quick round of shout outs to the sponsors. We have had Amanda from White Coat Captioning with us all day. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, Amanda. That's made possible through the support of our sponsors, Netlify, Fauna, and Auth0, all chipping in to make this show more accessible to more people and cover the general operational costs. All that automation I'm talking about, it takes people. That's how I pay for it. And that's why I really appreciate all the sponsors and what they put into it. Wouldn't be possible without them. While you're checking out things on the site, make sure you go and look at the schedule. We've got a really, really good setup coming up. We've got, we're going to do a week on music next week. We've got Dan Gorlick is going to teach us how to code music. So we're going to live code some music and not just like put it together and let it go. We're going to kind of algorithmically generate it. I've seen Dan do live performances before. They're incredible. I am really nervous that I'm not a good enough programmer to make this good. So we're going to see how this goes, but stick with us. So that's going to be a fun one. And then Shar is going to join us later in the week, and we're going to take that music from Tuesday and try to build a live visualization for it. So another really, really fun project. And for those of you who know me, you know that I used to play music and was a musician. So this is pretty near and dear to my heart. I love this kind of stuff. It's really exciting to me. I think these are going to be a lot of fun. And then we've got, Ben Holmes, who's been in the chat today, is going to be teaching us about Slinkity and debuting some brand new features for Slinkity. We're going to learn about TRPC, which I don't know very much about, but I'm very excited to learn. We're going to do planning and content. So that's really fun. If you're a content creator, you should come learn from Stephanie. And there's more. I have more in my inbox that I need to add to the site. So, stay tuned. Let's definitely, maybe go click this Google Calendar button, maybe hit the follow button on Twitch. Whatever it is that you do to make sure that things are saved and available to you. You can also subscribe on YouTube if you want to get the replays of shows. Follow on Twitter, whatever you want to do. You know what? I'm not going to tell you how to live your life online, but maybe hang out. Harshil, any parting words for everybody?
This is always the toughest section, I feel, of a live stream. But first of all, thank you so much for having me. It was very fun, to show out n8n and talk about automation and share some ideas. And I am looking forward to all those upcoming streams. They look really cool. So looking forward to that. And if anyone is creating any workflows or doing any kind of automation, and if you want to, just talk about it or, just chat about automation or n8n in general, just hit me up on Twitter and I would love to talk to you.
Absolutely. All right, Harshil, thank you so much. Chat, as always, thanks for hanging out. We're going to go find somebody to raid. It looks like Henri Helvetica is live with web page test, so we're going to go say hi there. And Harshil, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. We will see you all next time.
Yeah.